And we are live, maybe? I think we're live. Okay, so yeah, so like I said, my name's Danielle Adams. I'm a director for Women Who Code. Women Who Code, so I'm gonna do a little presentation. Oops, there we go. Women Who Code is a national nonprofit, or international, I should say, nonprofit organization with a mission to excel women in their technical careers. It's in, let's see, we have this wonderful map. It's in countries all over the world and all over the United States as well. There's chapters. In New York City, we have 1,600 members alone. We're one of the biggest networks in the world. We're really proud of that, and it enables us to bring you our wonderful events. Just as a reminder, I don't think we'll have any issues here, but we do have a code of conduct for our events. Just please be respectful of everybody that is here, including our speaker. We would really appreciate that. We do have a couple events coming up. Unfortunately, they are not on the meetup page yet. We're going a little bit slow on that, except for the remote hiring event. But for those of you that have already, this is not your first event, we do have a coffee code break that one of our leads, Kelly, puts on every week. That's great. It is during the workday. It's at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And so I think I'm joining her next week. We usually do, I usually do like an algorithm challenge with her. And then she also has other guest speakers on accessibility and other fun topics. We also have an inclusivity talks event. That date is TBD. We're trying to get a date that works for both of our speakers. And then, like I said, we have our remote hiring event, which is locked down. And for those of you that haven't joined us before, our remote hiring event is going to be, we have them every other month, I think. And so companies join us, they pitch their, if they're hiring, they pitch their companies. I believe you get to network a bit, and it's just a really great opportunity if you're in the market for a job. And then if you want to get involved or join our community and whatnot, please join our Slack channel. We're pretty active there. I will share a link in the chat. If you would like to be a speaker, please apply. We welcome first-time speakers. The first time I ever spoke publicly, the first time I ever did a technical talk publicly was at a Women Who Code event. 5 years ago, I think, at this point. It's a great way to get started if you want to try out a topic, or if you want to do, just kind of try your speaking talks. It's a great way to practice speaking in front of people, especially now that we're online, because you can't see everybody's faces. RSVP to our events, join us on Meetup, and then of course follow us on Women Who Code NYC. We have great articles. We have a couple of people that are responsible for our Twitter, and they post great articles and just different resources for enhancing your technical career. That's my last slide. Yep. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand it off to our speaker, Jessie Newman. Jessie is an algo engineer at Hudson River Trading. She's building tools used to create trading algorithms. Prior to that, she was a software engineer at Google, where she worked on Google Drive, Search, and Maps. She's passionate about writing maintainable code with extensive test coverage. When she's not coding, she enjoys reading and solo traveling. So I will hand it off to Jessie.
Hey everyone. So I'll start sharing my slides. 1 second. Okay, cool. I assume we can see this. Can someone in the chat confirm? Okay, great, cool. So yes, my name is Jessie, and we're going to talk about building a technical resume. So specifically focusing on a resume that is going to help you get a computer science or similar job. So yes, I'm Jessie. You can find me on Twitter. I feel like that was a pretty solid intro. I guess one thing I'll add is I also, I do a lot of interviewing. I work a lot of career fairs, and I am a resume screener for my company. And so that's sort of like where my resume experience comes from. So I have looked at thousands of resumes, and I also run some resume workshops. So as for like how the talk is going to work. So first we're going to kind of talk about like the theory of a resume. And then we'll go through like kind of like each section of a resume and like what you should be thinking about in that section. And then we're going to like do like a deep dive into technical experience, because that's going to be like the most challenging part of your resume, is figuring out how to describe like your work experience and your projects. And then we will do some resume myth busting. And finally, we will do questions at the end. So yes. So I guess first, let's talk a little bit about what goes on a resume. So I guess the first thing I want to say is I think a lot of people, when they think about a resume, they kind of think of it as like a list of their job history. And I really recommend that you do not think of your resume that way. I would really think of it more as a list of reasons that a company should hire you. So why would a company want to hire someone anyway? They want to hire someone who's going to make the company money, who's going to make their products better, which will make the company money. They want someone who's going to make people's jobs easier. So for example, your hiring manager likely wants to hire someone who's going to help them accomplish their goals, and who's just generally going to be enjoyable to work with and is going to contribute positively to the company and the company culture. So these are the kinds of things that you want to demonstrate on your resume. As for what you are allowed to put on your resume, the first thing I want to say is there's no rules about what goes on a resume, and I'll go a little more into that on the next slide. But in general, like, you should be going line by line through your resume, and for every single line, you want to think about, is this recent? That in particular is important. If you were in college, you want to be removing everything from high school on your resume. A lot of students I talk to will say, okay, but this high school project I did is actually really cool and really worth including. But as a resume screener, when I see a really cool high school project, usually what I end up thinking is like, why haven't they done anything this cool since high school? So it ends up not looking kind of as good as you expect it to look. So really, like, if your coolest thing you've done is in high school, like, just do a cooler thing. Every line on your resume should be relevant to the job you're applying for. So I kind of want to like break relevant into two categories. So we have things that are directly relevant to the job. So that's going to be any programming projects that you've done, and things that are indirectly relevant to the job. So that's going to be things like leadership and working with teams and interacting with clients. So sort of like soft skills that are like relevant, but are not, they're like going to help you succeed at the job, but they are not the job requirements. And so when you think about, is everything relevant to the job, you really want somewhere around at least 80% of your resume to be those direct relevant things. So programming. And then the remaining up to 20% can be those indirectly relevant things. So that's where you can show like your leadership and stuff. Anything that is not one of those should not be on the resume in general. So that's going to include things like if you were a cashier, that's your job history, but it's not really relevant to the job in either of those categories. The next thing, for every line on your resume, you want to think about, is this clear with no context? So in particular, if someone read this line on their resume, would they understand what it means? Or when they read it, would they be like, oh, that's cool, so what did you do? And if anyone ever asks you, so what did you do, while looking at a line in your resume, that means that the line is not clear enough to stand on its own, and it needs to be more descriptive. The last thing I'll add is that every line on your resume should tell me something I don't already know. And that's something I'll go into a lot more when we're breaking down the individual sections of a resume. As for what you can put on your resume, so I think there's kind of these ideas that there are like rules for what is allowed to go on your resume. There are not at all. So I guess the things you can put on your resume, you can put any work, regardless of if it's paid or unpaid, any projects, even if they're school projects, even if they're personal projects, even if they're really silly projects. When I was in college, I made a Google Glass app at a hackathon. And the app was you put on your Google Glass and it has a little like target on the glass, and then your friend shines a laser pointer around. And so you like aim the glass at the laser pointer and you shout pew pew really loud. And then if you aim it right, there's like explosion gifs in the glass. And like, it was an incredibly stupid project. Like that is not a professional project in any way. And I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of people are like, well, I can't put that on my resume. But I put it on my resume and people asked about it all the time. Every single interviewer were like, what is this pew pew shouting app? Like, you know, they got very excited about it. And it ended up being a great opportunity to show off some of my skills. It also like, it made me look like I really enjoyed coding, and it was something that I had fun doing, something that I really enjoyed learning about. And those were all things that were really good skills to show. So like, don't discount your projects just because they're kind of like stupid sounding. Okay, so now we're gonna go through like the format of a resume. This format is not required. There is not a defined order that a resume has to be in, because like I said, there's no rules. However, there is a pretty standard common order for a resume. And I generally recommend you use that order because when a recruiter is skimming your resume and they're trying to find something very quickly, if your resume is in the order that they expect, they're going to find stuff really quickly. And so it's just a little bit easier to parse if it's in that order. I probably should have said this at the beginning. This is a very US centric view on resumes. If you are applying for jobs in the US, all of this advice is going to be relevant. If you're applying for jobs outside the US, their resume requirements are extremely different. So just like keep that in mind while thinking about this. Okay, I guess I didn't have a section for your name and contact info, so I'll just like talk about that. So typically name and contact info, you're just gonna include your name, your phone number and email. Some people will include their address. I generally recommend against including your full address. I don't really want to know exactly where I could show up to find you, I guess. But it's just not really required for computer science. There are like jobs that do require your address, but like programming jobs are not one of them. It's okay to put just your city and state. Generally, what I would recommend is if you are applying for a job in your city, you should include your city. If you are applying for a job outside of your city, you should not. And the reason for that is you do not want the company to know if they're going to have to pay for relocation up front. That's the kind of thing you want to surprise them with later on after they are already excited about you. So next is your objective or profile. I actually typically recommend against including this in a resume, but there are cases where it makes sense. So we'll kind of talk through that. So we have this candidate, Fatima, and her objective is, I'm a recent grad looking for full-time positions in software engineering or machine learning, ideally at a big tech company. So there's a few things that I don't like about this objective. The first is she has software engineering experience. We'll assume somewhere else on her resume, it says that she is, you know, a new grad in computer science. So this is all kind of stuff that's implied. It's not a great use of space on the resume. The other thing is by saying I'm looking for either software engineering or machine learning makes you sound kind of waffly to whichever job you apply to. If you really were going to put that, maybe have 2 copies of your resume, one with software engineering, one with machine learning, and like, you know, make it look like you're picking a little more focused than that. Ideally at a big tech company is a little alienating to small companies. If you do send this resume to them, you don't really want the first line in your resume to be like, y'all aren't my top choice. So I'm not a huge fan of objectives in general, but I think this is one that would like actually look a little bad. Looking at a different one, oh, that's where that slide went. So we have Harumi. She recently did a coding boot camp after finishing, she had an accounting degree before. And so her objective is a little more useful. So she says, I just completed Typing Academy coding bootcamp, and I'm looking to pivot to software engineering from my previous role as an accountant. So that kind of like provides the context with which I should be reading the rest of the resume, because I'm likely going to be seeing previous accounting jobs and like, I might be like, that's weird, why is that there? And then have to kind of go investigate the rest of the resume and like figure out what's going on, and then realize like, wait, she only has programming projects, but it looks like she graduated forever ago. You know, so if your objective is going to tell people something that is like context that would help them understand where your resume is coming from, that's a good reason to have an objective. Yeah, if it's not, it's kind of a waste of space. Education. So there's a few things in here. The first thing I want to talk about is GPA. A lot of companies have very strict GPA cutoff requirements. If you are below that GPA, you do not get an interview. You are basically never going to know what the cutoff GPA is for the company. My general recommendation given that is that if your GPA is above a 3.0, that you should include it on your resume. If your GPA is below a 3.0, but your major GPA is above a 3.0, you should put your major GPA on your resume, which you do need to clarify. You need to be like, this is my computer science GPA. And if both of those are below a 3.0, you should just accidentally leave the line off your resume. Next from there, so the relevant coursework section, that did not exist. We have a question, what if your GPA is not from a related field? Honestly, that gets really tough. Sometimes I've seen people who like, they have a degree in physics and they have like a pretty low GPA, but like all their CS classes have a really high GPA. There's a few options. You can be like, my computer science GPA was this. There's really not a standard protocol though for that. Okay, there's a lot of questions. I'm gonna try to leave some of them till the end because I don't want to get too sidetracked. Unless it's like super relevant. Okay, so related coursework. So when I was in college, related coursework was not a section on a resume. No one ever did that. And it's super popular now. I don't really like it very much, if I'm totally honest. I think it's a little bit of resume fluff. So if we take a look at this example, we have Priya who went to Georgia Tech and she has listed her related coursework. And all of these classes that she's listed are kind of like, yeah, it makes sense that you would take those since you're graduating. Like there's not really any new information here. It's all stuff that's kind of like expected. Where if we take a look at Christina, so she has a bachelor's in aerospace engineering. So if I had seen this resume, I would assume she had not taken any CS classes. And so that's the kind of example where it might make sense to list your related coursework. So again, it's like, does this information provide stuff that I wouldn't have otherwise known? Work experience and projects. So we're going to talk about this for a bit, and then there's again going to be a whole section going more into detail on this later. So we have Claudia. She has two employment history things and one projects. Now let me actually take a step back for a second. So pretty much everyone has their employment history on their resume if they have had internships previously. It's also pretty common on computer science resumes to have a project section. If you do not have any employment history, you should just have a really large project section. So both of those sections are the ways that you're going to describe your technical work experience. Well, your technical experience, where one is work experience and one is more like just stuff I did. Okay, so looking at her resume. So first, let's take a look at projects. She has a project that she made in high school. Considering she's sending out this resume in 2020 and her high school was from 2015, this is not recent enough to be including on her resume. The next thing we can take a look at is she has this cashier at Chipotle experience listed on her resume. I would say that that is not relevant enough to the job to include. So she should be removing that and instead expanding more on her relevant work experience. And then let's dig a little bit into her experience at Atlanta Soda Company as a software engineering intern. So we have a few bullet points here. We have added features to the company's internal web app. So this is not super clear. We don't know what features she added. We don't know why she was adding them, like what internal web app, what did it even do, what did her features do. It's just not super clear. Presented work at weekly meetings. This is, it doesn't really tell you something you don't already know. Like everyone talks at their weekly meetings. You know, it's not like a novel thing. Like I would just have assumed that. So that's not a good use of space on a resume. Fixed bugs as they arose is also not super clear, nor is it something that I don't already know. Same with completed tasks in a timely manner. It's not something I don't already know. The other thing I want to talk about is including impact. And so we'll talk a little bit about this with our other example resume. So we have Noor, who has one software engineering internship and a project. So her experience is a lot more detailed. How do I minimize this? Okay. She worked on the company's internal order management site written in JavaScript with React. That is extremely clear. You know, it's very detailed. I know what the website does. I know what languages it is in. She talks about what features she added in detail rather than just saying which features. So for example, added text alerts using Twilio API to notify customers of order delivery updates. So these are much clearer and more detailed, and I can really like picture in my head what it is that she was doing. And that's pretty beneficial to me. It helps me remember the candidate, and it really helps me like get a better sense of like, you know, was this actually hard or interesting? And usually it is hard or interesting, but when someone just says like, oh, I fixed bugs, it doesn't feel hard or interesting. And then we really want to think about the impact as well. So this is a little tough, but in general, remember the reason companies are hiring you is because they think that you can make the company money. So you want to show to them, look, the things I did benefited this company. So they're probably going to benefit your company. So ways you can do that, like just by going into detail on what the bug is that you fixed, that might just kind of imply what the impact is. For example, fixed critical bug where improperly formatted orders could not be searched for by improving SQL queries used for searching orders. So it's a little bit implied why that is useful. It would be even better if she had said which prevented us from losing 20 customer orders per day. So any like quantifying of the numbers is always fantastic. Sometimes companies don't let you do that, especially with internship experience. They may be kind of picky about like what's confidential. So, you know, that happens. You just like do what you can. Someone asked if the slides will be posted. Yes, I'm going to email them to Danielle after and she can send them out. Okay, skills section is the next section. So when a recruiter or hiring manager or anyone is looking at your resume, they may not have very much time to look at your resume. Like it's going to be significantly less time than you are expecting, basically. And so the skills section is really good for helping them skim and find exactly what they're looking for. And because of that, it's very important that you keep your skills section super structured to help them do that skimming. So what I recommend is breaking your skills section into a few different categories. Pretty common ones are programming languages, libraries or frameworks, tools. Sometimes I see software if people have experience with like PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, like Photoshop or like Illustrator or stuff that like is unexpected. And then generally you want to organize, like order each of these languages and frameworks by proficiency. So that's a pretty standard way of indicating, like if you saw this on a resume, my thought would be this person, their strongest language is Python and their weakest language is going to be HTML and CSS, which are like not a language. I know you can stick them in the languages section, it's fine. There are a few other ways to organize this. I've seen some people, especially if they have a lot of languages they know, they'll have a line that's like languages proficient, languages beginner, you know? There's a lot of different options, but in general, just make sure it's structured in a way that it's easy to find what I want to find. The other thing I would say is I typically recommend against including soft skills in your resume. So specifically what I'm thinking is I don't like seeing team player or excellent communicator or attention to detail. I mean, when I say I don't like seeing it, I'm not like throwing out a resume because of it, but like that doesn't mean anything to me basically. So if you want to show that you have attention to detail, make sure that there's no typos in your resume. If you want to show that you're a team player, add how successful your internship experience was. And I know on an internship, you're going to have worked with a team. And so like if you were successful, you probably worked well with them. If you want to show you're an excellent communicator, you can do that by like really clearly describing your work experience. So in general, I'd kind of avoid the fuzzy skills. And instead, if you have like facts that you can use to back them up. So if you're like, oh, I'm a great public speaker, then include like a conference speaking section or something like that. The last thing is to back up your skills in other sections. If I look at your languages and I'm like, their strongest language is Python, then what I'm probably going to do next is I'm going to look on your resume and be like, okay, so let me see what they've done in Python. And so hopefully you'll have included some examples of things you've done in those languages on your resume. I know you can't necessarily include anything. A lot of you have so many personal projects, but you know, also in your work experience section, you should also be listing what languages and frameworks are used in that section to like back up. And this is why I know that skill. Okay, the very last part. So sometimes people include an additional section on the resume. This can be things like leadership, volunteering, activities, diversity outreach, like there's a whole variety of different things. The main thing I would recommend, besides like, you know, I said before, like this stuff is relevant, but it's less than 20% of your resume relevant. Like you don't want this to be the bulk of your resume. But when you start including stuff, try not to be too scattered about it. I think you should really have in your head an idea of like, what is the brand I'm trying to give off? Am I a person who, I'm like an excellent programmer who like helps make your company more diverse by like starting diversity initiatives? Like what is it that you want them to be thinking about you, and kind of structure this section off of that. So yeah, that's kind of how I'd be thinking about that section. Okay. Technical experience. So this is the hardest part of your resume, if I'm honest. So what we're gonna do is I have these kind of 6 rules that we should be thinking of, and then we're gonna go through some examples and see like what it looks like when you do not do that rule versus what it looks like when you do. So first, do not tell me your job responsibilities. Tell me what you accomplished. Second, do not tell me what you learned. Tell me what you did with that knowledge. 3, explain your projects clearly and in detail. 4, show impact by including numbers whenever possible. 5, quality over quantity. And 6, use strong language. So we'll have some examples for each of these. Don't tell me your job responsibilities, tell me what you accomplished. So taking a look at this candidate. So we have a candidate who was a software engineering intern at Apple. And so she says, I fixed bugs as they arose. I added features according to customer requirements. I completed tasks in a timely manner. And so we've talked a little bit about how this language is unclear. But in general, I also want you to think about like, these were what her responsibilities were. But what I want to know is like, given those responsibilities, like what did you do with it? What made you like stand out as an intern more than any of the other interns? And the way you do that is really by going into detail about like what you accomplished. Because if I'm hiring you to accomplish things. So I'd really much rather see added ability to preview moving background images on iOS 15. Fixed bug where some widgets did not appear in background preview mode. So these are her accomplishments at the internship. Next, we have don't tell me what you learned, tell me what you did with that knowledge. So basically, if you're in college, and this is mostly, yeah, anyway, so if you're in college, you basically have 4 years of experience where you are learning. And throughout college, you get about 3 opportunities to actually do stuff with that knowledge. And so you should not be telling me what you learned in those opportunities. Like this is your only time that you did stuff. So tell me about what you did. Like in general, like what good is it to learn stuff if you don't do anything with it? So instead of learn JavaScript over the course of the internship, became familiar with Google Search Code Base and best practices, you should tell me about like given that knowledge, I developed the Explore Restaurants Google search experience using JavaScript. Okay, explain your projects clearly and in detail. We've definitely discussed this in the previous section. So rather than like added features, you should be saying added Pinterest stories where users can view temporary content from people they follow for 24 hours. But I probably should have said what language they did it in. Show impact by including numbers wherever possible. I also mentioned this. So instead of improved speed of download video feature, I would love to see improved video downloading speed by 22%. In general, I think when you do not include numbers, people are going to kind of assume the lowest possible number that is reasonable. So including numbers is always going to make your accomplishments sound more impressive than they would have otherwise. I mean, unless you literally improved video downloading speed by 1%, like you should probably be including the number. And with these numbers, like I mentioned, you know, sometimes this stuff is confidential. It's totally okay to show if you're interning to be like, hey, manager, can you look over this resume for me and let me know if I said anything too secret and help me rephrase those? That's a really normal thing to do. If you are at a full-time job and you would like someone to look over your resume, what I recommend, so I sometimes include my resume when applying for conference speaking, and my company knows I apply for conference speaking. So if I asked them, hey, can you look at this resume? I just want to make sure it's fine, they wouldn't bat an eyelash at it. So, you know, you can come up with some sort of excuse why you are looking at your resume. Maybe it's because I got nothing. I don't know. Good luck. Quality over quantity. So this typically comes up when I see people who have very extensive work experience or very extensive personal projects. And they're like, well, I have these 7 projects and I need to include them all. So I don't have time to really describe any of them. Including 7 different projects that are just 1-line descriptions is not great. I would really rather see your top 2 or 3 with very detailed descriptions. I think that's going to make you stand out more. Because if I read about a project and I just don't understand and I don't get why it's impactful or why it was difficult, then like it doesn't really mean anything to me. And so that, you know, you tried to cut it down to 1 line, but it was worth 0 lines. So in this example, we have in our first section, we have 3 different projects, which are all like extremely vague. And in our last one, we have 1 project that goes into a lot more detail. And I'd really recommend going with the second route. Okay, this is the final one, use strong language. So one thing I see a lot on resumes is people will kind of undersell the work they did by using pretty weak language. So they'll say things like, oh, I helped build this. Oh, I worked with a team to come up with this. But like you didn't help, like you did it. Like everything is in a team. That doesn't mean that like you were just like part of it. It's okay to use strong language and be like, no, I actually did stuff. And if you're a little nervous about making it sound like you did more than you actually did, the way I would recommend fixing that is just going into more detail about which features you added. So you could say, oh, my team worked on this, and what I did was this, 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 and this. Okay, busting some resume myths. So the first, recruiters and hiring managers spend many minutes looking at your resume. This is not necessarily true. So sometimes people will only have 2 minutes to look at a resume. Sometimes they will only have 20 seconds to look at a resume. And so you should really be looking at your resume and thinking, okay, I'm going to set a timer and have my friend look at this resume for 30 seconds. And then they're going to tell me what they found in that 30 seconds. And that's why it's very, very important for your resume to be skimmable. That's why we talked about the structure of your resume being kind of like consistent with the average structure, as well as having your skills section be very skimmable. Other things I've seen people do is in their work experience section, they'll bold the important bits. And what they consider important varies from person to person. Sometimes that will be bolding the languages they use. Sometimes if they have really good impact numbers, they'll bold all the impact numbers. So there's a variety of ways to make your resume easier to skim, but it is very important that if someone does not have time to read your entire resume, that they're still able to get a very positive impression of you. Second, recruiters and hiring managers will always click through to your GitHub and portfolio. I have almost never clicked through to a GitHub or portfolio, and that is because I do not have enough time while looking at a resume to go and look at a second page of content. That's not true for everyone. I know some teams that like always check the GitHub. And so just be thinking about like, okay, so if someone does not have time to check my GitHub, what impression are they getting from me? Because I've seen some people where they're like, oh, well, I didn't go into a lot of detail on it because I mean, it's on my GitHub. But like, that means that some percentage of recruiters, a very high percentage, are not getting that detail at all. So, you know, make sure all the important stuff is on the resume. Okay, resume speak is important to sound professional on a resume. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine. So I guess I should explain what I mean by resume speak. So I think a lot of times when you like have kind of not very relevant or good work experience, you use this very like vague, fuzzy language to explain what it is that you did. And you're like, well, it's so vague that maybe it sounds good. So you'd be like, oh, I worked in an agile team environment to develop iterative features in a data-driven manner to improve client satisfaction. And you like use all these like weird buzzy keywords. And in the end, like you didn't really say anything, but like maybe it was good. That does not work well when you have actual good content. Like you end up like fuzzing it and making it so vague that I cannot tell what it is you did. Like sometimes I'll read descriptions of someone's job, and from the description, I cannot tell if they were a programmer or a product manager or like worked in another position because it's so fuzzy and vague. And so I would really recommend avoiding that kind of like vague, fuzzy detail and instead like being very clear about what you did. Oftentimes the way that I recommend people to do this is I'll be like, okay, so imagine you're talking to one of your friends and you want to tell them like what it is you did at work, but it's like a friend you want to impress. So you want to like make it sound good. How would you explain it to them? Like you'd probably give them more detail. You wouldn't be like, oh yeah, we work in an agile team environment, because that's like not how you would explain it to your friend. And so usually that kind of description is very close to what you can end up putting on the resume. Okay, you only need one resume no matter what types of jobs you're applying to. That is not true. I know there's like, people are like, oh, you should rewrite your resume for every single job application. And I mean, honestly, if you have the time to do that, like, sure. But in practice, you probably do not. What I would think about instead, though, so let's say you have some background both in software engineering and data analysis, and you would honestly take a job in either. If you write a resume that is going to be for either a software engineering or data analysis job, you know, we have our at least 80% of like relevant content. Well, now you have 40% software engineering and 40% data science, and you're trying to compete with your 40% software engineering against candidates who have 80% software engineering. So you are not going to end up looking like a strong candidate, and that's because you really tried to like make your resume apply to too many things. I know it sucks to make multiple resumes, but if you're applying for 2 different types of roles, I really think that is going to be the best use of your time. Otherwise, it's just not going to be a very strong resume. Okay, that is the end of the slides. So at this point, we can open it up for questions. I will stop sharing the screen. I saw a few questions about if the slides will be shared. Yes, I will share the slides.
Hey, Jessie.
Yeah.
I'm here. I got kicked out. If you want to make me, or you don't even need to make me a co-host, but I can read the questions.
I'm making you a co-host. Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
Okay. So
can we like alternate between questions that were in the chat, and then I also want to give people an opportunity to like ask questions over voice or video.
Yeah. Let's do that. So maybe if people have questions, can people raise their hands here? Is that a thing that we could do?
So you guys have the reaction button. I have it, but I'm a co-host. No
hand raising. Oh no, you have hand raising. Yeah, we got hand raising because that puts it in order. So let's do this. So we have some, I think you answered most of these. There's like maybe 5 that didn't get answered while you were speaking, but I'll try to go in order. Let's alternate between hand raising and then I'll unmute people. So um, just for time's sake, yeah, so I'm gonna think Rachita, I think that's how that says. I'm gonna unmute you and yeah, go, or you can unmute yourself. Great. Go ahead.
So I have this quick question about ATS. I've been reading a lot of blogs online about ATS and how they work. And most of the times when I apply to a job, I get a generic email which points to, on a lot of blogs, it says that they come from an ATS, that it was rejected from there itself. So I want to know what percentage of companies actually use ATS. Like, is it like a big deal, like every company is using ATS now, or a small a percentage of companies are using ATS, and how do they actually work? So how can I make my resume effective enough so that it passes through ATS as well as through an actual recruiter?
Yeah. So this is hard because both places I have worked do not do ATS filtering. So it's not something I have a whole lot of experience with. From recruiters I've talked to, they have said that ATS is sort of not used as frequently as a lot of people think it is, that it is not responsible for the vast majority of companies rejecting you, and that, oh, what is ATS? ATS is when a company does some sort of text parsing on your resume looking for keywords, and if your resume does not have those keywords, it automatically rejects you. So yeah, so from what I've heard, it's not used as frequently as people think, or that the companies that use it oftentimes, they use it to parse your resume, but they do not reject based on the ATS, and instead use it for things like filtering it to the correct recruiter and stuff like that. This is all secondhand knowledge, I should say. So I'm not totally sure. I don't think I have a lot of advice for how to get past ATS, unfortunately.
That's okay. Thank you for the
Sorry.
insight.
Let's hear from Jen.
Hi, hello. Hi. First of all, thank you so much for this great presentation. I feel I learned a lot. So I have a few questions. Hopefully I didn't ask too much. So first of all, I want to know the links. So you say we can put the email. So how about like the GitHub linking or portfolio link? If we have, should we put it in the resume in the first line? So
yeah, I think the header where you include your, I probably should have said that, where you include like your name and your email and your phone number, I think that's the most common place to be including your GitHub or portfolio or personal website. Sometimes I see LinkedIn. Those are all fine to include. Make sure that it actually is professional. I've seen one resume where someone included a link to their Instagram, and their Instagram contained a bunch of like anti-religious memes, which is just sort of like not an appropriate thing to be including on a resume. So, just like double check that everything that is being linked to is appropriate. But yeah, I think the header is the right place to put it.
So how about the email? Should we need to have a professional email, looks like?
I think so. I would never reject a candidate over an unprofessional email. I think it depends. So like, what is the level of professional email? If your email is like first name, last name, number, that's great. If your email is like coderjessie@gmail.com, like that's perfectly fine. If your email is like fun in the sun, like that's probably not what you want to use on a resume. So it should be at least semi-professional.
Got you, thank you. So maybe, may I ask the second question? Yeah,
Sure.
so how about like, for example, I used to work in another industry for many years, and now I'm trying to transfer my career into the coding. So then how recent, how many years working experience should I put in if it is not like programming, coding at all, it's not relevant? And how much detail I should go in? Should I just list all the position, or I should put one line or two lines to describe for both any or each position? Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand the number of years work experience question. Can you, like, what do you mean by that number of years?
So for example, like in my last industry, I have been worked like 5-7 years and with like 3-4 different jobs. So then how many position I should put in, or I just list 1 or 2, the recent one?
Okay. My recommendation would be, sometimes people get a little nervous about employment gaps. So if you have been employed the entire time from college to when you were doing this career change, you probably want to cover that entire time span to show that you did not have a gap in employment history. I don't like that people care about that, but they do. And then as for how much detail to put for each, I really would keep it minimal. It might make sense to do a 1-line description of what the position is, but I wouldn't go into like details about your accomplishments at those jobs, because those are not really going to be relevant to the position. Just kind of like, you know, like, oh, I was an accountant, I did accounting.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So can I ask the last one for real quick, for putting in the technical skills? For example, if I'm a front-end developer, then should I put some like the general work saying like the front-end development, like data visualization, performance optimization in the skilled list, or people will assume that I know this thing?
I think that could go either way. It's pretty common to do it. I personally, if I see someone say performance optimization, I don't really read into it too much unless they have otherwise on their resume been like, and I optimize the performance in this way. But I don't think there's anything wrong with including it. It's not uncommon to. There really are no like hard and fast rules on resumes, unfortunately. So there's not like a totally right answer to this. But it's okay to put more relevant technical experience, kind of soft skills like that. But like if you could, you know, if you use certain tools to do the performance optimization, I think including those tools would be a more useful way of describing it.
Got you. Thank you so much for your time. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to do a question from the chat. How much of the resume should contain keywords from the job description of the job you are applying to?
So people say a lot of times that you should include keywords. My experience from people I have talked to who also do resume screening and interviewing is that the vast majority of people doing it actually do not know what the job description says at all, which is kind of weird. So I don't know if I'd say like what majority of it. I think like in general, telling a job to a description is good, but I wouldn't kind of overdo it. Because honestly, a lot of times the job descriptions are going to be written by the recruiters, where the resume screening is done by the engineers, or maybe like vice versa, or maybe the job description is actually copied from a template created by some sort of hiring website, and is not super good description of the actual job.
Great. Okay, so Jen, would you like to would you like to ask your question? Hand down. Okay, thank you. All right, Sarah, you're up next.
Hi, that's me. Thanks again for doing this. So I just wanted to clarify about projects. Like assuming that they're projects that are outside of your work experience, do those go under experience, or is there a section for projects that are the unrelated stuff?
Yeah, I would say it is pretty common to have a work experience section for any jobs that you have done, and then a project section for any personal projects. If you've done anything at hackathons, if you've done anything at school, those can also go in there. But yeah, usually those will end up being in separate sections, but they'll be structured very similarly with like, you know, name of job, bullet points, name of project, bullet points.
Okay, and then where would you suggest putting like open source or boot camps? Open source is projects?
Yeah, I would probably put open source under projects. If the vast majority of your projects are open source, you can honestly have an open source section that's structured the same way. Like I have seen an open source section on a resume before. I did not think that was weird. boot camps, I would probably put under education if I was going to pick somewhere.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, because I also I actually have like an art background, and I transitioned to a front-end developer. I've been working in this position for 4 years. So like I always include my last position and education because I guess we're kind of like a unicorn having like the design background mix. But yeah, I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. And then Meg, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, Jessie. So I was wondering I'm also in a boot camp and doing like a career change, like I'm sure a lot of other people here are. And kind of like right now I have it more focused on projects that I've been doing through my boot camp. And I did get feedback after an interview one time when they said like, just talk about your projects as projects, not like school projects. But like, what should I have a degree in Spanish that's like unrelated to programming, but it's like still a high GPA. Should I include that on there or just not even bother with it?
I mean, I think it's worth saying that you have a degree at least, because a lot of companies that is a requirement, regardless of what the degree is in. As for GPA, I've honestly heard really mixed things about people who have been in the industry for a while. So I've heard some people say that they think it is weird when they see a GPA on someone's resume when that person has been working for multiple years. I've had some people say they think it's really weird when they do not see a GPA on a resume when someone's been working for a few years. If it's a good GPA, I think it's going to be safest to include it because it's not really going to take up any extra space. But there is not like a correct answer to that. And I think some people are going to feel different ways about it. As for projects, like, yeah, I think your bootcamp projects would probably go in a project section. The fact that you did them at a bootcamp does not make them any less relevant experience. Like you still did them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have some questions in the chat. First, what should be the length of your resume?
This is so controversial. My recommendation is going to be exactly 1 page. Personally, I do not care how long your resume is. It just does not bother me to see a resume more than 1 page. Some people, it really bothers them and they really, really want a 1-page resume. So because there is a very large number of people who feel that way, I think you are most likely going to want a 1-page resume. There are, of course, exceptions to that rule. If you have a PhD and that means you have a whole lot of publications, there's no way you're going to have a 1-page resume. It's just not possible. You should have a 2-page resume. If you're doing a career change, that might be a good reason to have a 2-page resume. I think the most important part, though, is if someone only looks at the first page of your resume, which is a real possibility, is your resume still going to be good enough? And that's something I think you should be keeping in mind if you choose to do a resume that is longer than 1 page.
Okay, I'm going to do another chat question. If you could offer resume building advice for folks coming from a field that's not related to CS or programming, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think if you are coming from another field, most likely most of the relevant parts of your project or of your work, most of the relevant things to put in your resume are going to be personal projects, most likely in whatever way it was that you taught yourself programming. So I would recommend having a very extensive project section, probably put that above the work experience section, since that's actually going to be the least relevant section. And then kind of like not include too much about your previous work experience just because it's not super relevant. Maybe like 1 or 2 bullet points if you don't have too many positions to like explain maybe like your biggest accomplishments and what the job was. One friend I have who is moving from a recruiter to a She's now applying for tech jobs, and we've been going through her resume. So the main thing that we did is she went through all her recruiting positions and thought, what is the technical work I have done in these positions that I can include? And she was able to include like, oh, I wrote some bash scripts that like sped up this recruiting process. And then she has a very detailed objective statement that says, hey, I used to be a recruiter. I did a boot camp, now I'm moving into tech. You'll see that I have a lot of previous recruitment experience. I've really only included the tech work I did at those recruitment positions. And so she's kind of like explained like, okay, this is how to read this resume in the objective section, since it's a little not standard.
Great, thank you. Neely, would you like to answer or ask your question?
Yes. Hey, Jessie, thank you for speaking today. So my question is something related to being like, I've just graduated from a PhD program, and that's my only work experience for like at least the past 6 years. So, but my projects have been related to coding and the work I want to get into, which is data science. So I was wondering whether that should go under work experience or I should just lump everything into projects.
For a lot of PhD students, a lot of what I've seen is them having a research project section or just a research section and like putting it in there. And then it's a little, if that's the kind of projects you have, it's a little more implied that it's like, it was school, but like, you know,
Right, yeah.
I think that might be a good way to do it. Because yeah, that's a little confusing.
Exactly. Yeah, because I don't have like company work experience, but it's just that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Can I actually steal, there's a specific question on the chat I want to answer.
Yeah.
So there's a question about, would you recommend using resume builder templates or a simple Microsoft Word resume? So I don't like resume builder sites. And the reason I don't like them is because I think it can be really hard to get the kind of customization that you want. However, I do not recommend grabbing a default Microsoft Word template. And I really do not recommend trying to make a resume template yourself. Unless you are like a designer, like go for it. I am not, I can't make my own template. So I should have mentioned, in addition to sending out the slides for this presentation, I am also going to send out a slide deck of my favorite free and very cheap, so $2 or less, resume templates that you can download. And I think using a resume template like that, a lot of them like have color and they like are gonna like present your stuff really like visually and stuff. And I think that is gonna make your resume stand out. I know when I work career fairs, sometimes it's literally 8 hours of standing there looking at resumes. And so when you get like, you know, after like resume after resume after resume, and then you get one that's like really pretty, you're like, it's like refreshing. And then you suddenly remember it after kind of like just like losing track of everyone. So I think having a very visual and pretty resume can actually be a huge benefit to you. Enough that I paid $10 for my current resume template, which is a lot of money for a resume template, but it's very pretty.
Great. And then this should be a quick one. Do you have a preference for 1 column or 2 column?
Okay, I actually really prefer 1 column resume templates. The reason for that is not that they are inherently better or anything like that. What I've seen happen to a lot of resumes is they will start with a 2 column layout and they will put all their good content in the larger column. And then they will suddenly have this little skinny content column. And they're like, well, I don't know what to put in here. So they put kind of like not super useful stuff in there. And then they have all this stuff they didn't include because they were busy filling in the little column. So I think my real recommendation is that the first thing you should be doing is writing your resume without any template at all. And then after you have done that, you should be thinking about, okay, what would be the best way to organize the content I have already decided to include on my resume? So your template should be working for you. You should not be changing what you want to talk about to like fit the template. That's the wrong way to be going about it. So really either is fine as long as the template is not holding you back from including your strongest stuff.
Okay, and then we have a couple more down here. Do you have any recommendations for, I I guess this is specific to resumes for a mid-level engineer with a few years experience looking for senior roles.
I don't know if I have anything super specific to that. One thing I should mention is I have about 7 years work experience. So I don't know if I'm qualified to like give super looking for senior level roles advice.
That is fair. Okay, and then another question, how could someone with no experience build a strong enough resume to get their first job experience? So maybe that's, we moved the offset down a bit. They're probably kind of the same question though.
Yeah, okay, so if this is a really good question. So my general recommendation is going to be to do a whole lot of projects. Like instead of a if you don't have a work experience section, that's fine. That just means your project section is going to be twice as long. But you have to have the content to put in that project section. And so the hardest part of this is honestly just doing the projects. So they can be personal projects. It's okay to include school projects. I think those are usually going to be lower quality, but sometimes they're not. Like I definitely, I made a Game Boy game in a college class that I included all the way up until graduating and had people ask me about that one. So I would say sign up for a lot of hackathons. Those are, I think, typically the easiest way to get started on a project because you have access to mentors. And specifically, if you work with like APIs, so there are sponsors there representing those APIs, they'll like help you with it if you get stuck. So that's like a pretty good way to like ramp up on new skills and build some projects. Yeah, you kind of just have to do a lot of stuff in your free time, which is unfortunate.
And should we put online courses like Udemy in our resume?
I usually do not like seeing that, but I don't want to say like a hard no or anything. I think if you have a computer science degree and you've taken a course on like a computer science topic, I'm going to find it a little weird that you also included that unless maybe it was like really, really targeted. If you have a different background, maybe it would make sense. I think it's really going to be a case-by-case basis of like, why is it you're including this? Is there a particular skill you're trying to show that you have education in? And like, do you need to show off that particular skill for this job?
Great, thank you. And then where would I find information? So we're gonna start kind of winding down. So if everyone, because we're running out of questions, so if anyone has any questions we didn't get to, please drop them in the chat or raise your hand. Where would I find info on hackathons?
So most hackathons are targeted towards college students directly. So for the college students, if you Google like, I think MLH, Major League Hacking is like the big hackathon organization. And so they probably have a list of like the big upcoming ones. Those are going to be usually just open to college students. A lot of them you have to apply to get into. I'm not really sure how that's working with things being online right now though. Perhaps they're letting in everyone. I don't know. If you are not a college student, it is a little bit harder to find hackathons. If you search like adult hackathons, I think you might be able to find stuff. I don't have like a website that's going to have them all, honestly. But I know like a lot of companies will hold hackathons. So for example, in New York, Microsoft holds a hackathon every year in their office that people will go to, and they'll like spend like 18 hours for a whole day just coding. And you can just sign up to go. There's no requirements to get in. Anyone's eligible. I'm sure it is not happening in person this year. But so a lot of companies will have them as well.
Yeah, and if you all look in the chat, so many people have great resources. Also, if you are an NYU student, just from my own experience, I know that NYU advertises, if you go through your emails, they'll advertise like different events and hackathons. Just throwing that out there for you New Yorkers. There were so many resources that I lost track of the questions.
Thank you everyone in the chat. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that you guys are like saving me from the ones I don't have answers to.
Yeah. This is a good one. How do you feel about cover letters? Is it optional? Does it give applicants an advantage if we include one? I would also love to know this because I hate writing cover letters.
I would say less than 1% of applications I see have a cover letter. Every time I see a cover letter, I read it in full because you're like, oh my God, a cover letter. It's like so weird to get one that you read it. So I would absolutely say they're optional. I have never submitted an application with a cover letter, and I don't really intend to do so. I also think in general, the cover letters I read are not very good just because I don't think there's a whole lot of resources for how to write computer science cover letters because they're so unpopular. I don't even know if I have advice for what you would include on them because I've like only seen like 3 in my life. So I'm not going to recommend you write one, but you would, stand out. So if you're going for that, it's definitely an option if you think you can write a solid one.
And how long can you keep things on your resume before it becomes irrelevant, like the number of years?
I don't know if I have a strict number of years. I think the general rule, I would say, if you're in college, you want everything gone from before college. After you've been working for a few years, you want everything gone from college. So no college hackathon projects. I've been working for 7 years. I got rid of my internship experience at about 4 or 5 years. So I don't know if there's an exact number, but I think like what to keep in mind is your experience should be getting better and better over time in theory. So, your experience 5 years from now will ideally just be stronger than your experience now. And your experience now will not really be worth including because, if you're a new grad right now and you're working as like an entry-level position and 5 years from now you're a tech lead, like you're just going to want to talk more about the tech lead stuff. So I think it'll happen a little more naturally than that.
Well, Graham, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Jessie and Danielle, for doing this. First of all, I have an art degree and went to boot camp. So I have so many different experiences, and also I have a lot of like freelance experiences at one place and had 4 different positions, and it wasn't necessarily full-time. Is it okay to put that all in the resume?
Yes, I would absolutely include freelance work under your work experience section. Regardless of if it's full-time or not, I don't think it matters. You can, if you want to list that it was part-time to like, or freelance to indicate that like, because depending on how long you worked, you don't want to be like, okay, well, I worked there for 4 years and I only did this stuff. You don't want it to look like you didn't do a lot. As for if you have done a lot of different projects for one company, I think it is reasonable to break down your work experience section where you say, okay, I freelanced at Google, and this is what I did on the Google search team, and this is what I did on the Google Maps team, and kind of like break it down further so that you can have sub bullet points rather than like this huge long list of everything you've ever done that's kind of like unstructured. And that's basically going to end up looking like multiple positions, just kind of like at the same company.
Got it. Only the thing is I worked at Brooklyn Museum and it's not like, it wasn't tech role, and I put in a different bullet point, but it became too long and it's more than 20%, including my other experience, which is like retail, manager at store, and also freelancing for building websites for people. And do you just recommend it to shrink it out to 20%?
Yeah, if it's more than 20%, you just got to start cutting bullet points.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So next question, let's do like 2 more questions. Should I explain COVID layoffs on my resume, or any layoffs really?
This is the first year I have started seeing people talk about COVID related, about kind of like extenuating circumstances.
Be economic related.
Yeah, so like one thing I saw was someone being like, job offer from X, parentheses, retracted due to COVID, which was like I don't know how I feel about it. I definitely wasn't like, that's bad. I wasn't like, that's good. I was like, this is completely new. I don't know if there's really a strong reason. I think in general, if I saw that someone stopped working at their previous job in April, it would be implied to me that it was COVID related without them having to say they were laid off versus they quit versus they were fired. I think it's probably not necessary to put it unless you've been, if you have some reason to believe companies are rejecting you over that.
Okay,
That's
cool.
not a great answer. Sorry, I don't really know.
No, I think that's great. I guess we'll just kind of see, you know, how that all plays out. I'm sure it'll be a little bit more normalized, maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year. So a question for Bianca. Bianca, if you're out there, I did ask a clarifying question, but I'll just ask your question. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay. What about recommendation letters? Should these be sent in with resumes? Yeah.
No, and you should also not include your references on your resume. Recommendation letters are the kinds of things that happen later in the process if a company requests them. It's great to already know who your recommendations are going to be. When job hunting for my first job out of college, out of like 20 different jobs I was talking to, one asked for recommendation letters. When I job hunted this time, I was eventually asked for recommendation letters, but it was after I received a conditional offer for the company. So it was extremely late in the process, and it was not common. So I would not even have them already written up or anything like that. You very likely will not end up needing it at all.
Great. Okay, we have one more. This is going to be the last one. Would you indicate a career gap in your resume? So I'm thinking this would be, you know, if you have a child, if you leave for, you know, a leave of absence or whatever.
This bothers me, like in a societal kind of way, that we're so weirded out by career gaps, because that kind of like disproportionately affects women. I probably would. And the reason I would is because many people I have talked to are freaked out when they see a career gap and they like take it and assume negative things. And so if you're like, and it was for this completely legitimate reason, which like it pretty much always is, you know, then you have that there. So I probably would include it. And I hate that I am recommending that.
No, I think that's a good answer. Yeah, so, oh wait, okay, one more question from Huojin. Did I say that right? Huojin?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for today. I just like, I was procrastinating, should I ask question or not, but then I should. So I have art backgrounds. I've been making interactive installations. So I do have my art projects that are related to computer programming in some sorts, like a lot of prototyping with like Arduinos and like C++, but not majorly. Does that like includes in projects, or is it 20% section?
I would say that is included. That is not 20% because you were programming. I think I'd recommend a similar thing I said earlier, where you kind of say like, hey, I have an art background, so I've included the technical portions of my previous experience. And so, I mean, you can even put it in work experience if it is more of a work experience kind of thing, and then sort of just include the technical portions, and then like maybe also a description of what it was you were building, because I do think like, you know, knowing like, why did you use Arduinos? Like, I'm gonna be really curious, like what you did with them.
Right. I was just a little worried because those are a lot of interactive, like physical interactive installation work, and the jobs that I'm applying are web developing positions. So
yeah, I mean, web development is definitely going to be more relevant, but I think Arduino programming is relevant enough to web development that it is not an issue.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. That concludes our event. Thank you so much to our speaker. It was great. Okay, so we recorded this. I will send out an email with Jessie's slides. She said she would share them. And then also we will eventually get this up on YouTube. Let's stop recording. Never mind, I'll find the button later. But yes, thank you so much to everyone for coming. Please join us again in the next event. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much.